Well, you see, you're not, but about the escapes.
How are you?
Good.
Talking to Barb. I haven't seen her.
Oh, you're not talking about.
We're fine too. Well, everybody's been getting their vitamins, taking their daily walk, drinking the water.
Vitamins.
I'll jump right in. And I like to start by backing things up a bit. So we are doing this series on making peace with your past during Lent for our Wednesday services. Thank you to the folks who have spoken on Wednesday and then working together with our series here. Says, you know, one of the things you really want to do before you got the idea from some hospice material that I encountered back when I was doing chaplain training. And I wonder, Paul, you've probably seen this stuff a lot in your career. It's really important conversations to have. Really important. And thank you. Please forgive me. I forgive you. I love you and goodbye. So my understanding is last week we did thank you. What did you learn?
Be grateful for the little things.
For the little things or what for the big things?
Not too over.
Yeah. What'd you learn?
Also be thankful in times of stress.
What is the value of really focusing on your gratitude? What does that accomplish for your spirit? Yes.
Keeps you from being overwhelmed, where you feel stressful in your life.
Because we always have something going on that would give us a reason to be upset, whether the upset is angry or afraid, or maybe we're just disappointed. Right? Disappointment comes all the time, and if we are grateful, we can be mindful of that. It doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to all those other feelings. In fact, you can't ignore all those other feelings. That's the whole point of this series, right? Is we aren't ignoring any of those feelings, any of those conversations. But when we begin, grab the Paul.
I was just gonna say that I think what I've learned is to pay attention and be grateful for the usual and ordinary things.
Yeah.
You know, when I talk to people toward the end of their life and they're, you know, if you ask them what they're hoping for, it really is the usual and ordinary things that we otherwise take for granted. And if you are watching for that every day, there's a lot you can find.
I just found out this morning that we had a member of our congregation really interested in starting the Befrienders ministry up again. We've had something like that going sort of on the slide. People going and visiting folks in their homes. And I love that ministry because it's one of the easiest things to do to really feel your own gratitude and then also to experience other people's gratitude. In particular, and this is something I learned in chaplaincy, so I bet Chemizier could tell us all about it, is there are so many people who have no one touch them. When you're a mom or a grandma, somebody's always hanging on you. And you can forget how precious it is to have somebody touch you in a way that is not them doing something to you, like giving you your insulin. Or checking to make sure you don't have a bed sore. So if you can be grateful that maybe you have somebody in your life, whether it's a friend or a family member or a cat, to touch you. God gives us bodies. That's something also to be grateful for, even when they don't get along with us. So today we're going to do Please Forgive Me. This is this might be a little bit of a harder conversation because if we're going to talk about the experience of asking for forgiveness, that requires us to do one very important, very difficult thing. What is it?
Recognize it.
Not just recognize it, but to
Acknowledge it.
say it out loud, right? It's like when we talk about death, people are, you know, you can have the idea of death, but that's very different than saying, I'm going to die. And from what I've observed, it gets harder the closer you get to it. It's the same way, I think, with forgiving. Please forgive. If you've ever been involved in 12-step program, or a friend who's been involved in 12-step program, they have a making amends step. Wonderful step. It's a beautiful step to watch, and to listen to somebody tell their story about making amends. But please forgive me. Is when you know it's not gonna work out. You're not gonna make amends. I mean, please forgive me as part of the amends. We frequently come to this point, I need forgiveness. Because I can't make this right. I can't unsay what I said, I can't undo what I did. Or I can't do what I didn't do, or say what I failed to say at the right time. And I think that this ability and the courage to say, forgive me, to ask for that gift, because you can't earn it, is one of the hardest things that we do, but it is also one of the things that is core to our Christian identity. There's a story, I know best the version, I think it's in Matthew's gospel. I can't remember if it shows up in the others. I think it's in all the synoptics. Where Jesus and the disciples are outside of the temple. I see two men praying. One of them, he says, is a Pharisee, but for our purposes, let's say that it's like a member of the executive committee at church. Oh, God, thank you so much for making me not like these idiots. Thank you for making me generous, and thank you for making it easy for me to behave. Thank you for helping me have good language all the time. And then there was somebody else. This might be the kind of person who shows up 3/4 of the way through worship, and then they come sit in the front, and they've got their service dog. It's not actually a service dog. That growls at you. They, you, not they, because I smell like a dog. And all they're doing the whole time is crying. Lord, forgive me, I'm a sinner. If you know that story, the actual version, not the John version, who does Jesus say comes away from that experience with grace? Say it loud.
The sinner.
The person who is willing to admit it, because the Pharisee is a sinner too. We all are. So how do you, and you all been doing this for a while, how do you get to that point where you can say it out loud? Let's start with just saying it out loud to God, because we got to talk to God first, and all of our sin touches God, because everything that happens to any person or any creature on this earth, that one belongs to, is precious to God. But what is in your lives? You don't have to say what you did or what you failed to do. How do you get there? How do you do it?
We pray.
Right.
Pray for help.
Y'all remember when Nixon was impeached?
I wasn't born yet.
My grandma was a Democrat from Sweden, sent to my dad. Well, she says, what do you think of your slicky, tricky dicky now?
And he received a pardon, right? So they didn't have to go through that whole experience. Anybody know what his wife thought of that? Pat Nixon? She was pissed
Yeah, you got a pardon?
that he received a pardon and that he accepted the pardon.
She wanted it held up.
She was mad that he accepted the pardon, that it was offered and he accepted it. She was mad, and she would tell anybody who asked, he did nothing wrong.
That's what you.
It's not a given, right? So being able to say that, being able to ask, please forgive me, that requires a great deal of maturity and some clear-eyed looking at yourself. So how about, so we talk about God, and if you're trying to BS God, you're gonna lose that argument, right? How do you get there with a person? Somebody you see every day, because that's that's who you sin against the most, right? It is. How do you get there with a person that you love and also can get really, really tired of?
The grace of God.
The grace of God, Jan,
I've been blessed with family members that help me see when I make mistakes.
funny because
And so then it's just a matter of, am I gonna be defensive? Am I gonna be, giving all my explanation? One of my things that I just recently become aware of is that I focus on my intent. Well, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I wanted to do, instead of my impact, which is, oh, what did my words or my behavior really do? So I'm at a point right now, 70-some years old, that I'm trying to be more aware of my impact, because my intent is always good. I mean, truly, I want to do.
I've known you for a number of years. What about the rest of us who don't always have pure intentions? I mean, those pave the road to hell, but so do the bad intentions. How do you get there? You do.
I think at one point you can, maybe you talk, you pray about it, you talk to God about it. But you can write it down too. You know, you write it down so you can see for yourself, like if you want to apologize to somebody, write it and you can see and maybe that'll help you give the strength to speak the words. But there's steps, to look at yourself within. But one of the things I've had to tell myself is not to beat myself up over it. That I know that God forgives me and God sees who I really am. Like Jen says, you have good intentions sometimes, but anger, frustration, defensiveness comes out. And so you take those steps to say, okay, God, show me, teach me. And I just find write it out, well, why I got so upset and did the things I did, or why I, went off, whether it was anger or just stupidity, and that helps them to take the step to actually talk to somebody. But I do have to say, because I've had somebody that apologized to us, our family, for something they did, the 12 steps. We had no clue of what was done. And it actually made us more, I don't even want to hear this, because it was horrible what they were telling us. And it's like, I would have been better off you didn't even tell. If you're working on yourself, so you have to be aware too that if you did things in the person, you really have to think about the person you're apologizing to, that is this gonna be more harmful?
Yeah.
Or helpful?
And that, I'm glad you bring that up because that is part of the step. Right? Part of this, the making amends step is trying to discern whether or not you pursuing amends with the person whom you have hurt would in fact harm them. And then you're doing it for your own benefit instead of to try to repair something that's gone. And I think that's a really big deal for us as Christians. How do we discern whether we're apologizing for our own sake or for somebody else's? And part two, if we are apologizing for our own sake, is that a bad thing? That's hard, I think. So let's first do the first half of it, right? How do we discern whether we are apologizing, seeking to make amends, asking for forgiveness for the purpose of acknowledging the harm we've done to someone? Because acknowledging that you've harmed someone can be a big healing thing for them. If you hurt somebody and you never admit you've hurt them, and they carry that around, and you're treating them, and they think that they deserve whatever you did. For an example here, it's not going to point anybody out. I got rear-ended in 2006. Driving, it was winter. My wife was in Chile with her dad, so I had her car. Running errands for my parents over my lunch break. And there was a guy driving way too fast on an icy road in a snowstorm. And as I was trying to pull into my parents' driveway, he rear-ended me so hard that it bent the frame of the Jeep out. The officer who wrote out the accident report on that wanted to say that it was an accident with no fault in it. Because she was a Marine veteran, this guy was a Marine veteran, and she's like, you don't really want to do this to him because he's driving without insurance. And so she wrote it up that way.
Whoa.
Right. Could have happened to anybody. Right, that was kind of a lot, right? He went out of his way to say, no, I was driving too fast, I didn't have insurance, and I did this. Sorry. What's the difference between those two responses to that motor vehicle accident? He sure was.
Taking responsibility.
Yeah. I think
And accountability is.
accountability and responsibility and acknowledging that his behaviors had consequences for somebody else. Is that, I mean, the end result of both of those ways of approaching the accident were the same, right? Because I eventually got the cost of the repairs mostly covered. What does that story have to do with someone saying, please forgive me? With us saying, please forgive me? I don't bear him any ill will. And in fact, when he couldn't pay for it, the first thing that we told the courthouse was just let it go. But how is it different from me being able to say, my own choice? I don't want you to throw him in jail because he can't pay this fine or help repay the repair bill. And the sheriff's saying he shouldn't have to pay the repair bill because of the service he'd given to the country before. How's that different?
You probably wouldn't have been so forgiving if he hadn't admitted his guilt.
It would have been a lot harder to just say, it's okay. Let it slide, right? I mean, that's one of the versions of the Lord's Prayer is forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Because we have this understanding that sin creates a debt. That's one of the ways we understand it. Whether it's a financial debt or a debt of responsibility or a debt of reputation, if you say something bad about somebody that's not true. So what does the please forgive me accomplish in that sort of a situation?
You have to forgive the officer for looking at it the way he did.
She,
She looking at it the way she did to say, that's not being honest.
Yeah.
You have to
she
forgive.
didn't care. I talked to her at the court.
I think I'd be taking that up with their supervisor. 15-year veteran police officer, so I would have a problem.
Well, I worked for an officer of the court at the time, so it was complicated about the fact that I needed sheriffs to testify.
Yeah.
And they can say no, or they can just not show up because they're busy. So, but just again, blow it out, not the particulars about me, right? Because the particular is universal, right? But just imagine it's not me, right? Because now you're thinking about me get hit. Think about what does it mean to not admit that something wrong happened versus to admit it. And that's
So the guy who was at fault, when he said, no, it was my fault, and I don't think he said he was sorry, but
Yeah, I actually had to come into the house because it was snowing so bad. He called, had some phone calls.
for him, it was really good for his life going forward. Hopefully, he would be able to amend that he wouldn't continue to drive in a way that would certainly be likely to harm others. And I think that for him, that was really good that he did that.
Yeah, he was on his way to pick up his dog. Working as a cabinet maker, just bought that car from his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child, and was trying to figure out how to make things work. And things are hard. So what does that mean for us? Yes, Jim?
What she was saying is really true though, too, even for just in our family. I'm sorry only goes so far. If you're saying you're sorry because you put the wet wash rag on the counter for the 29th time. Well, then you shouldn't do it the first time. I mean, please.
It's almost like I planted that question with you. How many times should we be able to ask for forgiveness?
29.
29 times. That's it.
Yeah,
Doesn't the gardener say just one more year?
there's one more year.
Little fertilizer?
How many times? 7, which is an absurd number.
Why seven?
But
It's
just take
absurd. It's just a number that he used, right? Just,
I didn't know if there was.
because the way the original question was phrased, it wasn't 29, it was Peter asking Jesus, should I forgive someone as many as 7 times, like a whole week of wrecking dinner? And, leaving the dishes undone? He's like, no, man, 70 times. So,
Well, I think that forgiveness, I mean, if your heart is open to it. I think that forgiveness is just, you have to be able to forgive people. I mean, otherwise you carry that with you. People that do you wrong, you're gonna carry that with you forever.
I think personally, if you practice saying, forgive me, the more you recognize or practice being someone who asks for forgiveness,
Mhm.
that takes practice for me.
Does it change your attitude towards other people who hurt you?
But
Sort of. I mean, yeah, it doesn't always, right? Because we're all of us sinners and self-centered, and we really want forgiveness. It's the I forgive you is next week. It's the other side of the quarter.
That's such a.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question? I don't know whether it's pertaining to what we're discussing here. Sometime in my life, when I get angry, say something, and then I feel bad about it, and then I have to say sorry. But it has been a long time what I think I should do. When I'm in an argument or something that I would say or do, it would hurt somebody. I always figure out that I should give something. If I'm having a discussion or having somebody, we in a turmoil or fight or something. It's best for me to not say anything because I might say something that will hurt somebody or do something that I will regret it. So I always walk away from problem. It's just something that I pray over and I try to, it's a hard thing to do, but I try to work with it. And because sometimes it's hard when somebody hurts you and that person don't want to admit it, but you still carrying our hurt and our burden. So the best thing is, whatever you did wrong to that person, or that person did wrong to you, what free my conscience is to go to that person and say, you know what? Whatever happened, maybe I hurt you, or maybe you hurt me, but please forgive me. So it has to be in my life for my children. Sometimes, and the white people feel like to apologize to is your children.
Don't say
No, when I say that, is that sometimes your children do something to you or you do something to them, but you can never find the fault in yourself that you wrong your children. With me, So I always try to be balanced with my children because maybe if I did something to them that hurt them, and sometimes they would keep it. Like I had misunderstanding with one of my daughter. It was something I said, but I didn't know it hurt her, but it did hurt her. I overlooked it. Her son was graduating. I offered to buy all the meat that we were gonna barbecue. So we went to Walmart. All day we've been shopping. I'm tired, I'm hungry. And she just there looking at the meat and telling me, so I told her, I said, just take it and I will prepare it before you put it on the grill. And then she said, oh no, that's not how so-and-so person can do it. Okay, I've been cooking for, I don't know, forever, and cooking for them forever. And she telling me that's not the way. She telling me that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the way that Mary prepared it. So I didn't say a word. The only thing I said, I just rolled my eyes and said, I said, oh well, say whatever. Then I walk away. I didn't know that whatever hurt her. So she called the next day when she went, she called the other sister, my younger daughter, and said, Mom hurt me. And my daughter said, what do you mean by Mom hurt you? Said, Mom told me whatever. So my daughter, like, you know, Mom said things that just come out of her mouth. She didn't mean nothing. She said, well, you should have seen the way she rolled her head. So, and she was rather right, and she was feeling bad because I was her son. So to make peace, and I didn't want her to feel bad because that was her son's graduation, and I had offered to buy this thing. So I called and I told her, I said, you know what, I'm sorry that I rolled my eyes at you, whatever, but I didn't mean anything. She said, well, Mom, the way you're too up for it. So I said, well, I don't want to say whatever again, so I just said, I'm sorry, Mom. You know, I talk sometimes, I don't be thinking. So I said this, that sometimes when you're angry or frustrated, it's just best to keep quiet. You think that solve the problem? Because you might say something that you gotta go apologize, you know?
It's very, it's a mother-daughter thing, a lot of daughters feel, at least in my circumstance, feel criticized. Where my intent might have been a compliment in some way, or just a comment.
Yeah.
And it comes flying back in a different way. And you end up, there hurt feelings, and like Jan said, my intent was not this. It's like exact words I use.
I also have a wife and daughter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these all sound like really, really good strategies when the person that you want to, from whom you desire forgiveness is available. What do you do if they're not? What if they aren't speaking to you? What if they're dead? Hey, I had years where I just didn't know how to not feel haunted by not spending more time with my uncle and my godfather when he was dying. I was a freshman in college. I was really excited about doing freshman in college stuff. And when he was healthy enough, which wasn't healthy, he would come and we'd go out for lunch and spend time together. And I'd go back, and then when he wasn't healthy enough, he ended up living in the parents' house. I didn't go home for months. Little leaky duck. Absolutely haunted by him. What do you do? Is there a way around that?
You forgive yourself.
Forgive yourself.
Yeah. But I didn't want forgiveness from me. I loved him and I missed him, and I felt like I was wrong not to go. Paul's making a face like she's biting on words.
No.
I think there are people who find comfort in writing something to somebody that they can no longer speak to, that you can still deliver your message and depending on what your faith journey is, have some belief that they're receiving what you've said. And if, you saying it is enough. I've learned something, from one of my kids. And this is my daughter Anna, who has 3 little boys, and her life is busy and full, and they are active, and there's a lot of accidental, not intended to kind of hurts. And unlike maybe how I parented, maybe handed down to me from my mom, you insist on an apology. She doesn't do it that way. She goes to the one who is the offender and says, I really hurt your brother's feelings. I think you would feel better if you would be able to tell him that you are sorry and you feel ready to do that. She doesn't insist upon it, and she doesn't impose a penalty on the kid who did the thing. You know, she just helps them think about how what they did impacts their relationship. You know, and you start with your sibling, great, because it prepares you for other kinds of relationships. So where I'm going, I guess, is just to really be ready for that apology and to not just do it. It's like, check, got that done.
Yeah.
Other Chris, you had your hand up.
Oh, I was just gonna say in response to your question about, you know, what if you can't, like in your instance where you can't say you're sorry to that person. One thing that I've found, in my case, it's with a counselor, but I think with someone, a friend that you trust, who would listen, and importantly, in that situation would be that the friend not defend you, you know, not say, well, you were in college, you know, you had friends and, you know, studying and other things.
Chasing girls, drinking beer.
But it's,
What happened?
you know, just listen and let you express it.
So I'm not gonna tell the story, 'cause it's not mine, but sometime I would like, I hope you all get a chance to hear my dad tell the story about the last month or so of my uncle's life. And the conversations they had, specifically surrounding my uncle's very difficult relationship with their dad. To have someone to be an interlocutor, just to, or to stand in that place. I'll lean on about it. Tim, what do you do when you want to say you're sorry to somebody who's dead?
Before I get to that, I had another thought I want to share before I forget it. I think there's consequences to not asking forgiveness. I have seen those in my own life, in the way I interact with others. I've talked pretty openly about my relationship with my dad, and gosh, what a surprise. If I didn't work and settle that relationship with my dad, I had a little bit of trouble with my own kids. I think that we carry the luggage of not going down that road with us in our dreams and in our interactions with others that remind us of that person who we have unfinished business with. And until we do that work, we're gonna keep tripping over the same stuff because it's most often comes from our family of origin. And so back to your question, John, what'd you ask me?
How do you get asked for forgiveness from people that you wronged who aren't here? You can't talk to them face to face. You can't call them on the phone. You can't send them a letter that they will.
Yeah. I think you keep working on forgiving yourself for the things that you didn't see at the time because maybe you weren't mature enough when it was all happening to see your part in it. when I think of some relationships, well, when I think of the relationship I had with my dad, I would tell people that I have a better relationship with my dad 18 years now, 18 years after he died than I ever did when he was alive.
Yeah.
And it's because I've kept working on it. I have written letters and just processed them. I have processed dreams that I've had about my dad. And it tripped me up when Luke was a little boy and I was looking at him and I distinctly remember that when I looked at him, I remembered this interaction I had with my dad, and I was the little boy and he was the dad. And it just, it slapped me in the face because all of a sudden I was there, like that. And I realized that I still had work to do to just forgive myself for misinterpreting the effort my dad was just, trying to do the best he could with what he had. It wasn't perfect. And the more I've been able to do that, I think the better relationship I had with my own kids and with people that remind me of my dad. There are people in this congregation with characteristics that, oh my gosh. You're my dad reincarnated. And I would tell people that are working on this, go sit with that person. Find that person, sit with them, and do all the things that you couldn't do when your dad was alive with that person. And that's another way to work on that.
I want to say that I had a difficult relationship with my mother, and listening to Pastor Tim talk about his relationship with his dad. My mother is also gone. She's been gone for about 10 years. And I have learned some things from listening to your conversation about how I need to step back and assess my mother and what she was and what she was dealing with and how she was dealing with it and how it affected me. And so I think I still have some steps to go through to get to that point. But it has helped me a lot to listen to your conversation. So thank you.
We are very, yes, Jan, go.
I think she made the same point, and I think you're all making the point. I think we honor people when we tell the story. If they're not there, if we tell the story from a good spot in us, intent again. And then that story gets handed down and shared with others. Other people can, like go see their uncle when they're a freshman in college, because John screwed up and I'm not gonna do that.
And call it, right? Not to try to
Yeah.
excuse, but to say, no, I did wrong.
My grandma was in her 90s and she told me this story about being mean to somebody at Valentine's Day when she was in like 4th grade. And I told that story to my kindergarten kids for years around Valentine's Day. It was like, this really happened. And I hope some of them learn not to be mean to others because of the story that grandma told. She regretted it. She was in her 90s and she felt bad about something she did when she was 8.
I get, once again, Jan's plan.
Yeah.
Because this is the story I'm gonna end on. Right, because we're making the move from please forgive me to I forgive you. Like that's starting to creep into and these are the same. It's all the same work of the Holy Spirit that Jesus commands us and empowers us to do. In all 4 Gospels, Jesus is betrayed, denied, and abandoned by his closest friends, except for a few who just stood there and watched. I think that one of the most instructive pieces of that story, the different fates of Judas and Peter. I think that the difference between them is whether or not they believed that it was worth seeking forgiveness and whether it was possible to seek forgiveness. Judas didn't think it was a thing. Certainly not a thing that was available to him. So depending on the version, he either ran off and fell down and burst, right? Fell on a rock and split himself open, or he killed himself. Peter, stupid, impetuous Peter, believed it was possible he could be forgiven. And he was willing to experience that destruction of self that comes with saying, please forgive me. And Peter became the rock on which Jesus built the church. Dumb as a rock. It's not the stability, it's the stupidity. He was stupid enough to think that God would forgive him for denying Jesus, when Jesus had already said, if you deny me, I'll deny you. But he just was willing to risk it. And that's the gift here in these conversations. Please forgive me. Be dumb enough to risk that conversation. Because you can, in that, you can experience and you can give someone else the opportunity to be Jesus in the world. See you next week.
Can I just add one?
Yeah. I'm done.
I'm sure you and Pastor Tim and Paul probably have experiences, maybe others, but it's never too late. When you're talking about like your grandmother being 90 years old, it's never too late. And if they're not there, I know from my own personal experience, I did not know, I know my mother carried something that just tormented her through life. And then before she died, the day before she died, she talked to Teresa. So if somebody is there, whether a pastor, a friend, counselor, if there's something that you feel you can't talk to, the person's gone or whatever, just talking to somebody to let go of that. It's never too late. You don't need to wait till you're 90 to tell the story of, I was mean and I really feel bad about it, but it's never too late to share that and let it go and let it go.
I just want to say something that has helped me. My father and I were very, very close. He passed away from cancer quite abruptly. And I felt like I had said everything I needed to say to him, but I learned more about my father and the fact that he was not infallible. After he died, more so than I thought he was when he was here. And I talked to him just like I'm talking now. I'll have a conversation with him. Sometimes him and I always drink coffee together. Sometimes I'll even pour a cup of coffee and I'll just sit there and vent. And I can feel a connection with him. Whether it's with his spirit or it's just my psychological, whatever it is, but it puts me at peace. And so and I tried to writing it down and I found a card. I was struggling several weeks ago and I had just moved to a new area and I didn't know anybody and your church has been a big help to me, but I just was really struggling and I found a card that he had written me for my birthday some 12, 15 years ago. I had just gotten an automobile accident and I was in the hospital in a coma and he wrote me a card and it said we still have moments to climb. And I found that card and I read it and I just started to cry because it was right at that right moment when I needed to hear from him. So it was like hearing from him beyond, you know, and so it was really helpful to me. And I just wanted to share that. Maybe that would help somebody else.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for today. We'll have more fun next week.
Yeah,
Very nice.
Go grab the tray.
So it's working.